Welcome to Do the Dang Thing podcast with Chrissi Sperduto, the podcast that's like having a personal business coach in your pocket, giving you bite-sized tips and small mindset shifts every week. I'm your host, Chrissi Sperduto. I'm a network marketer turned productivity and mindset coach who grew her businesses while holding down a successful career in aviation. I'm on a mission to help you fit your business into everyday life. I believe you are capable of achieving success no matter how chaotic your life is. Consider me your no-nonsense guide to getting it all done. Join me here on the podcast each week where we'll chat everything from systems to help you fit your business into real life, to business and marketing tips, plus time management hacks, mindset shifts that can help you find the courage to take the next step in your business, and real life stories to inspire and empower you to go after your goals. Let's go, CEO. We have work to do. Grab your favorite cup of coffee or wine, no judgment. And let's get ready to ditch those inner mean girl thoughts ringing in the back of your head so you can embrace your inner badass and go do the dang thing. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm excited to be bringing on another very special guest, another Threads connection, actually. Samantha from Firestorm Finance. She's a bookkeeper for creatives and coach for bold bookkeepers, which I love so much. I'm gonna have to ask you about that niche pivot that you had there, because that was really cool when I went and looked up your profile yesterday. So welcome to the podcast, Samantha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's always fun to get to record podcasts with new people and get to know them and have them share some of their expertise with us. So I would love to know a little bit more about you and also your business. Tell the listeners all about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Canada, actually. I moved to Texas in 2020 in the midst of COVID, just because my husband lost his job and my parents were moving here. So we're like, why not come down to Texas and see what it's like? And I'm half American by birth, so it was a really easy move for us to just come down and get started. I was in corporate bookkeeping for about 6 years, so 2 years in Canada and then 4 years here before I finally called it quits and decided to start my bookkeeping business. I don't know, there was something about it that just called to me. I didn't want to work corporately anymore. I kept getting called at like 2 a.m. in the morning being like, hey, can you please come in and work some overtime? And I was at the point where I was like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to work long hours anymore. Of course, I started my business and I'm still working long hours, but I'm working hours for me, so it doesn't feel as bad.
Yeah, there's something different about working on your own terms when you're working long hours as your own business owner, right?
Yes, absolutely. So my business started in February of last year. And I started off just helping bookkeepers for creatives or bookkeeping for creatives and just helping them understand their numbers and figure things out. And then just recently, and this is not launching until August 19th, but I took a big pivot and I'm going to actually be coaching some bookkeepers as well. Some of the local bookkeepers I've been in touch with have seen like the success that I've achieved and have asked me if they could like mentor them and help them. And I honestly had no idea where to start, but I'm really starting to develop a program so that I can help other bookkeepers as well.
I absolutely love a good pivot like that. And that fits so well with what you're doing. And that's something that I tell my students all the time. Like, you are your brand. And so as long as you continually market yourself as your brand, you can always make a pivot like that and it makes sense. For listeners that don't really know what a creative is, can you define that so we're just all on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, creatives is a really broad spectrum. When I think of creatives, I think of anyone with like a creative bone in their body. I think of the people who are running Etsy shops and making things handmade. I think of website designers. I think of like my client that made me my t-shirts, my graphic t-shirts, the print shop. I think of coffee shops. I think of really anybody who's super creative. And that's a very broad spectrum. But a lot of the times, those types of people generally have the same outlooks on business and the same goals where they want to like reach a certain point, or they really want to get like crafty and they're like, I want to grow my business to this. So it's really easy for me to transition to, even though they're in like kind of different industries, they're all in that kind of creatives field.
I love that. I think of them as maybe people that have a business but aren't the analytical looking at the data all the time. Need a
Yes.
little bit of help with that. So I think that encompasses a lot of my listeners too. So what advice do you have for the brand new business owner or a business owner that maybe hasn't kept up with their books very well? Like, where do we even start? Usually the first step is always the hardest, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I always advise some people to get on an accounting software just to start. If a software is not your thing and you're like, I am so not ready for that, a spreadsheet is just as good. Obviously, it does not give you all the insights and everything that you can get out of a software, but as long as you start by tracking, that's really your first step, making sure that you're tracking your income, tracking your expenses, and having knowledge of what they are will help you to know, like, okay, I have $25,000 I'm spending in expenses, but I'm only making $5,000. That's a big problem. That type of thing.
Yes, that absolutely would be a problem. Unless, you're just using it for the write-offs. I'm not the expert in that, but I am curious. You said that you did this in Canada. How is, like, I don't know that I have any Canadian listeners. I know I have a listener in Croatia. So every country is going to be a little bit different. Any advice for, like, navigating your specific country's allowable things?
Yeah, Canada and the US are actually very, very similar in the sense of like what's write-offable. There are a couple of like big differences. I don't know the laws recently or how much has changed since I've been there, so I'm not 100% sure. But obviously the best advice I can give you is to not just work with someone like me, but to work with like a tax professional who will actually be able to understand like, okay, you can write that off. There is a legal way to write that off, or there is a write off that we can explore with this kind of deduction.
I love that. My husband luckily takes care of all of that for me because it is so far above my head. What else? What else does the basic business owner need to know to keep track of? So we have the software set up. Is
Yes.
there like a habit for them to get into of tracking a specific you know every Friday, once a month?
Yes. Yeah, so I actually believe in doing it once a month at the very least. So obviously, I would prefer if you did it weekly. I check all my clients' books weekly. Specifically because when you're doing it weekly, you catch things like fraud. You can catch things like, oh my gosh, my deposit didn't come in. So, for example, like one of my clients was expecting, I think, 130K in deposits from one of their processors. They were doing their books on a spreadsheet. They never caught it. And all of a sudden, when I was doing their books, I'm like, hey guys, there's 130K in missing deposits here. So, doing it weekly will catch that, but doing it monthly will also catch that, especially if you're like, if you feel stressed about it. So if you're someone who you're like, I don't want to come near money, I'm really scared of money, at least set aside a time for it every month. The way I like to think about it is like it's a date with your books. So don't make it like lame and boring. Put on some music. Grab a bottle of wine, maybe grab some water, whatever your drink of choice is. Sit down, do your books, get it done in a couple of hours, and then be like, okay, I'm good. I got it done.
I like the idea of considering it like a date. And I think if you were to do them every single week, how much time do you think the average business owner selling digital products or courses or coaching, how much time do you think that would actually take them?
If they were to do it on a weekly basis, I can't imagine it taking more than an hour, maybe even a half hour if they don't have that many transactions.
I love that. Yeah, it's like if we just keep up with it, it's not a huge chore. We talk a lot about habits here, so I like that you said, make it a date with your books. Grab a glass of wine. I'm partial to the spindrift or some coffee. What are some other things to just kind of put this into your every week, every month, or every other week routine?
Yes. So definitely checking your bank accounts if you don't already do that. I mean, I am a chronic bank account checker. So every morning I'm in there and I'm like, is there anything new in there? And I'm like, okay, I see that my payment to my coach went out. Good. I noticed that. That's a good charge. But then at least you can, like, I know I said catching fraud when you're recording your expenses, but if you're also looking at your bank account, that can also give you an opportunity to catch things like firsthand. I'm not saying check it daily like I do, but still making sure you check it weekly would be good. And also like comparing it to what's in your spreadsheet or comparing it to what's in QuickBooks, because no system is perfect. And I think that that's so important to note is that technology is limited. You can't put all of your reliance on it. And a lot of people are like, oh, AI is going to take over bookkeeping, things like that, or tech is going to, but to a certain point, yes, but to a certain point, no. So while it can recognize transactions, like I've seen QuickBooks AI already try to be like, this is what this transaction is. And I'm like, no, no, it's not. Yes. Usually when you have like rules and stuff like that, so one of my clients was like, I have all my rules set up, so it should be so easy for you. And I went in and I looked at their rules and I'm like, well, QuickBooks is calling some of these things that aren't even supposed to be in this category under that same rule. And I'm like, that's when you need to really like watch it. You can set up rules, but you want to approve every transaction. You want to make sure everything looks good. So just doing a really detailed and thorough analysis of your books every week will be great. And obviously, on that monthly basis, you also want to analyze your your financial reports, because looking at your financials is important. And the top 3 that I always recommend is your balance sheet, your profit and loss report, or your income statement, and your statement of cash flows.
I love that. Can you kind of tell us what each one of those are? Because we are
Yes.
brand new business owners, or we're business owners that focus on the tech or focus on the creative and not so much the tech and the numbers, and we avoid those things.
Yes, yes. So the balance sheet, and I always have really good analogies for these. So the balance sheet is essentially what you own, what you owe, and then everything that's left over. So what you own are your assets, your bank accounts, any like assets you have, like a building, or if you have, I'm trying to think, furniture, things like that, anything you're writing off. What you owe is your liability. So any loans, credit cards, things like that. And then what is left is your equity. So everything that you have in the business, that's essentially like your stake in the business. The profit and loss or income statement is essentially asking you, how much money did I make last month? So when you look at it, you're going to be able to see your top line revenue. At the top, you're going to be able to see your cost of goods. If you have a cost of goods, you're going to be able to see everything that you have for expenses. And then obviously that bottom number is going to be your net income. And the thing I like to do and make sure to look at is the percentage of that. So what percentage of income did you retain from that overall revenue? Because that'll give you a really good idea of, okay, I only retained 2% of my revenue. What the heck is happening? And just give you a little bit more insight into that. The statement of cash flows is the question it answers is, where the heck did my money come from and where the heck did it go? So your money came from your net income, or maybe you got, like, a lot of my clients take Square loans. So you got a new Square loan, your money came from that. And then you took a $2,000 draw and you paid off $5,000 of your credit card. That's where your money went. And it just tells you, okay, now you only have $3,000 left over in your bank account because you spent more than you brought in last month, or something like that. That's how you can really look at that.
That makes sense. And, when you're doing it every week or once a month, you can catch when things are a little bit off kilter or a little off balance. Like, hey, maybe I need to reel in my spending a little bit. And, or hey, maybe we got to do an extra launch this year that we weren't originally planning and things like that. I was going to ask you as well, like, how do we know when it's time to go from DIYing it with our QuickBooks software to hiring someone to help us?
Yes. So obviously, I am an advocate for doing it right away, but I know that's not always a possibility. I mean, I myself, when I was running my creative business, I didn't even think of a bookkeeper. I didn't know what a bookkeeper was. So I was like, why would I hire a bookkeeper? But Honestly, it's when you're at the point where either one, you don't want to look at your books. You sit down every month and you're like, this is the worst thing I could possibly do in my business. Why am I wasting my time with it? The other thing is obviously time. So if you are like, I'm short on time, I don't have any more time to look at my books, I just need to just hand it off to someone else so I can focus on other parts of my business. And then the third thing I like to say is obviously money. So if you have expendable income and you're like, you know what? I can just hand this off to someone else. I don't need to worry about it anymore. That's also a great time to know when to outsource that.
Yeah, there's certain things like as the CEO of your business, only you can do, right?
Yes.
Like you can't duplicate that. You can't duplicate yourself going on a podcast. And so if you need to free up another hour a week to go on and do podcasts and do networking and those sorts of things and be the creative brain behind your business, behind your brand, that's a really great place to free up an hour of your time. And then you ask yourself, what is an hour of my time actually worth? And put a dollar value on it. And if you can have a book for less than what that dollar amount is per hour, like, let's go for it, right? That's where we are, like, it mathematically makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And, you don't always have to go for like the biggest package either, because a lot of bookkeepers I know nowadays package their services. If you're like, I don't know if I want to spend that much on bookkeeping, you can start small. There's no reason that you have to be like, I need everything, like the whole bag of tricks. I need to know all of the analysis tools, things like that. Start small. They'll help you, be able to analyze things and see things. And sometimes bookkeepers do catch things that you might not have caught as a business owner. That doesn't mean you were doing a bad job. It just means that we have a different set of eyes and skills and analytics than what someone who is wanting to be just creative might have.
Absolutely. I think anytime that I look at someone else's business or someone looks at my business, they see something that's like blaringly obvious that I didn't notice because you're so much in the weeds for your own business all the time. So the name of this podcast is Do the Dang Thing. So I would love, Samantha, one or two things that the listeners can go out and do today and implement from this episode.
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is definitely start tracking your income and expenses. So either with a spreadsheet or with QuickBooks. If you're not already doing that, make sure you at least find some way to do that. I have a spreadsheet that I like sell as a digital product for people to be able to track that. But if you're like, I have enough funding, I can afford QuickBooks or even Wave. Wave is free. You do have to pay for bank connection now, which I hate. I hate that they did that, but you do have to pay for the bank connection now. Like use Wave, use something to track your income and expenses. That's something that you can do right now. It's easy, it's simple, especially if you only have like 10 transactions per month right now. Just tracking that is going to make a world of difference. The second thing I want you to do is pull up your most recent profit and loss statement and take those percentages. So all you're going to do is divide your net income by your revenue, and that will show you your percentage of what you have. And if that number shocks you, you need to do something about it today. So that's where you're going to look at your expenses and say, whoa, like, do I really need this? That's when you do like, what I like to call it is an expense audit. So if you're seeing your your net income being 2% and you want your net income to be 15%, what can you cut out to get your net income to be that 15% consistently? So that's the second thing that you can do today for sure.
I love that so much. Where can they find you to ask more questions or inquire about, having you as their bookkeeper?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm pretty much everywhere. You can find me mostly on Instagram and Threads at Firestorm Finance. If you want to work with me, my website is www.firestormfinance.com. I have 3 different packages, so all different types of people I can work with and different types of budgets. And even if you see something that doesn't work for you on there, don't be afraid to reach out because I'm always willing to work with people. For me, my heart is in this to really help businesses. And while I need to make money, I'm always willing to work with people on pricing so that we can at least get them the help they need to get started.
I love that so much. And by the time this airs, your podcast is going to be out in the wild. So tell us where we can find the podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is going to be available everywhere you can listen. Obviously, I will give Chrissy a link so that she can put it in the show notes. But Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, everything like that, it'll be all over the place. The first 4 episodes drop on July 31st. And then from there, we're going to dive right into getting into some interviews.
And what's the name of the podcast? I don't think I caught that yet.
It is called Creative Minds, Smart Money.
I love that so much. What a great title. I love it. I just love it. Any closing thoughts for the listeners today?
No, I mean, like, make sure that you listen to this episode and do the dang thing and get that done for sure.
Yeah. Always go back and take some notes because there were a lot of really good nuggets. I'm gonna have to do that myself.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time today, Samantha. Thank you so much for giving us all your knowledge, and I can't wait to listen to your podcast very, very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Do the Dang Thing podcast with Chrissi Sperduto. If you know someone that could benefit from today's chat, please send this episode their way. Also, I love to see what you're doing while you listen. Share what you're up to while you listen to today's episode and tag me in your stories at Chrissi Sperduto for a shout out. Plus, while you're there, hit follow for even more tips, behind the scene views of what I do in my business, and plenty of encouragement for you along your business journey. If you'd like to explore more resources and learn how we can work together through one of my online programs or through one-on-one coaching, head to chrissisperduto.com. Please always remember that you are not alone on this adventure. I am always rooting for you. Until next time, keep doing the dang thing. Bye!